today. Jane and I are both members of the Boone County Master Gardeners, and anytime she does a program for us at Master Gardeners, I don't want to miss, because she is very well informed, very enthusiastic about native plants and about trying to nix the invasive plants. And there have been some changes, and she's going to get you all up to speed on that. So if you have any questions, even during, I think if you just let us know, she'd be glad to get any input you have or questions you have. And so this is Jane Savage from Zionsville.
From where?
Zionsville. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I will kind of describe what I'm going to do. I have some handouts, which I'm going to pass some out now. I have 3 posters. One of the posters will be in the slide. The one that's over at the Indiana Invasive Initiative will be in the slide. The poster on invasive plants is from Brown County, a group called the Brown County Native Woodlands Project that began about a decade ago to try to control, and I'll have to say control, we can't get rid of them, control and manage invasives in the park. And it has spread throughout the county to landowners as well. And then this is from the Department of Transportation. It says wildflowers, but I'm going to explain the difference between a wildflower and a native plant. So usually when I give these talks, it's a 3-hour talk, but don't worry. I have taken a third of the slides out. It may be longer than you want to hear, because Phoebe said she would like natives and invasives. And some of the slides I can go through fairly quickly, so if you have to leave or you get bored, I will not be offended at all. First of all, I'm going to hand out the slides of the plants that will be, I'm going to hand out the paper, the plants that will be in the slides. So if you want, then you can keep track of them that way. And the second paper is, the hardest part when we moved back to Indiana was finding sources of native plants. That has become a good bit easier. So your second handout will be sources of places to purchase native plants. But on the other side, you need to keep it for later, because it's a list of invasives that I'm going to talk about. And I removed some of the pictures to shorten the slideshow on that. So, you're fine. So that's the second handout. I also have, when you want to get them, are catalogs from Prairie Nursery, and I will be talking about them. I have ordered plants from them and been very happy. I try to get them locally if I can, but there's some things in the Prairie Nursery catalog that I do like. And they are really fantastic to deal with, because they send me 2 cases of these catalogs free every year, and I use them all. Okay, well, the background on the words in the outline is supposed to be a light green. So whenever that comes up, remember, it's all through the slideshow. That's supposed to be light green all through there. But I find when sometimes it just won't translate into certain projectors. So native plants and invasive plants, and why we should be concerned about them, and we should be concerned about all of them. The outline role for gardeners in preserving native plants and biodiversity. And remember, biodiversity is going to be key to a lot of this. Definition of a native plant, the value and advantages of native plants. Native plants are essential for insect life, and when we talk about wildlife, a lot of that wildlife we're talking about are insects. And I know people go, ugh, insects, and get out the insect spray, but the next time you do that, think very carefully about that. Biodiversity and ecosystem services. Have you heard the term ecosystem services? We're going to have a list of those. A selection of native plants and landscaping ideas, and our disappearing habitat. Doug Tallamy is a professor at the University of Delaware, and I believe has almost single-handedly been responsible for getting people really, really interested and excited about native plants and their value in the landscape and to us. And he's been here for the Indiana Native Plant Society several times and other organizations throughout the state. And he writes, chances are you have never thought of your garden, indeed of all the space on your property, as a wildlife preserve that represents the last chance, and think about those two words, we have for sustaining plants and animals that were once common throughout the U.S. But that is exactly the role of our suburban, and because we have some property in Brown County, I have added and rural, and you would have rural here as well, landscapes they are now playing and will play ever more in the near future. We are important participants. By planting native plants, we become important participants in helping reverse the loss of plant and animal habitat and diversity by creating healthy ecosystems in our gardens or our farms or wherever we are. So what is a native plant? Native plants, and this is the definition that I have found is the most widely accepted and the most easy to understand, are the plants that were growing in a region before European settlement. This does not mean that the Native Americans did not move plants from one place to another, which they did. Now this is a more detailed explanation by Doug Tallamy, who's on the left, and Rick Dart, both very knowledgeable and experienced in horticulture and sustainability. A plant or animal that has evolved, and that's your key word there, in a given place over a period of time, sufficient, another key word, to develop complex and essential relationships with the physical environment and other organisms in a given ecological community. And I think that defines a native plant better than the first, but the first is just a little easier to communicate. They evolved over thousands of years in communities with insect and animal populations to feed and reproduce on them. And one of the key words here is reproduce. They can feed on them. A butterfly bush can be fed upon, but it does not offer a place for reproduction. And it is now becoming notice that is becoming invasive.
The butterfly bush?
Butterfly bush. Bush, not butterfly weed.
Yeah, the big, the long,
Yes.
it grows kind of tall, and has
Yes,
the white,
creamy,
smells
pinky,
good.
purpley,
Yeah.
butterfly bush.
Did you say that's becoming invasive?
Yes,
Ooh.
I know. I've got a sheet I'm gonna hand around later with some invasives I was just notified, plants that are becoming invasive, I was just notified about, and you will be surprised what they are. They've adapted to local climate and growing conditions. The native plants include flowers, grasses, trees, shrubs, vines, mosses, ferns, sedges, rushes, and I never investigated what the other plants were. It seems to me it covers most of it. I love the prairie dropseed as a grass. Now, this is, would you believe, a burning bush? But it is our native burning bush. It's the eastern wahoo, and it belongs here, not the other one. They grow in meadows, woodlands, edges of woods, prairies, ponds, pond edges, wetlands, rocky areas, roadsides, and gardens. And this is a wetland area, so they have a rain garden here, which I think is really neat, and this is the front of our house. And I don't ever recommend you just get rid of all your plants and plant only native plants. Begin to work native plants in and see what grows best for you and what you like. I have hosta, I have other plants that will fill in here, but I have a lot of purple coneflower, and I have a lot of rudbeckia, the black-eyed Susan, in there across the front of our house. When we first moved in 15 years ago, there was a water break in the water pipe from the road up to our house, so we had to have some big equipment come in. And at that time, I said clear anything, any shrub growing near the house, and we have no foundation plantings whatsoever. It's just native plants. All right, the difference between a wildflower and a native plant. Wildflowers are plants that grow in the wild on their own, and you're probably familiar with the garlic mustard. It's not native. but it is a wildflower because it grows in the wild on its own. And this is purple loosestrife, which can cause a lot of problems for people. This picture, which isn't as clear as it is on my screen, is from Kankakee Sands, Prairie Restoration. You know where Kankakee Sands is it Newton County, the northwest of the state? So, native plants are wildflowers in their regional habitat. Again, the key words are regional habitat. If I'm growing a native plant from California and Indiana, it is out of its regional habitat and it could become invasive here. It gets a little complicated. But not all wildflowers are native plants. This is chicory, and one of the first talks I gave, I was talking about the lovely combination of Queen Anne's lace and chicory. And then I thought, well, I better look that up for the second talk. And it turns out that Queen Anne's lace is a noxious weed for most people, especially the farming community. So all of these are native plants. Native plants are indispensable. I don't know how many years it took me before I came up with the word indispensable. You know, important, essential, vital, but they literally are indispensable. They are the foundation of our natural ecosystems, and they protect our biodiversity, and they serve as the basis for biodiverse habitats for birds, bees, butterflies, other insect pollinators, other insects, and a variety of wildlife. They provide wildlife with food, shelter, and again, a place to reproduce. They create and sustain diverse communities of healthy and balanced natural habitats, and they provide life-supporting systems for producing oxygen, cleaning air, recharging and purifying groundwater, sequestering carbon, modifying weather, and renewing soil. They do a bit of work. This is I'll think of it in a minute. This is an oak tree.
Autumn clematis?
No, it's the nine bark,
Okay.
and then a variety of native plant garden and an oak tree. Nine bark. It's a native shrub.
Something you have a name for it? Does it smell really good?
No, it doesn't smell, but it has a profusion of white flowers about 1.5 inches, 2 inches in diameter. Really lovely in the spring. This is the Biotic Pyramid by Aldo Leopold, and he really began to talk about a land ethic, our relationship with the land, and how important that was. And he was one of our first environmentalists. And we begin with the soil, and then plants, and he's talking about native plants, and then it just goes on up. And without good soil and without the native plants, we wouldn't get too far. So I've always liked that pyramid. Now, the importance of insects. If we were to wipe out insects alone, this planet, the rest of life and humanity with it would mostly disappear from the land within a few months. That is really kind of a startling statement. So, wildlife and insects when you think of wildlife. And E.O. Wilson is a specialist in ants. So I think he knows what he's talking about. I have a grandson who likes to step on ants. It drives me crazy. Native plants are for the insects, and insects are for the birds. And while we're talking about this, and I haven't quite figured out how to work in pollinators, because all of this creates habitat for pollinators, and we are dependent on much of our food from pollinators. And you may be aware that there's a movement to get information out about the importance of planting gardens for pollinators and plant native plants. Whereas your butterfly bush would have pollen and nectar for pollinators to survive. It is not a host plant for any insect to reproduce on. So it's not as easy sometimes as you would see. So 96% of terrestrial birds feed their young insects, and caterpillars are the primary insect food for young birds. Most insect herbivores and specialists will eat only native plants. Native plants are vital for insect biomass. I thought they were kind of interesting in pictures. I don't think I want them crawling all over me, but I want them in the trees for the birds. So Doug Tallamy has sent his researchers out to count the moths and butterflies that use these plants as their host plants. They will reproduce on these plants, and the insects, the birds need these plants nearby to get the volume of caterpillars to feed their young. So I was going to put this picture together because he has spoken about that in several of his talks, and lo and behold, there it was on the internet. So I didn't have to do it, by Doug Tallamy. So for a clutch of chickadees, now they're little birds, remember, it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise a single clutch of chickadees. Many terrestrial birds live exclusively on insects. Bluebirds do, they may eat a bit some fruit, but insects mostly, are virtually, on insects, and virtually all must have insects to feed their young. Insects only occur in abundance where native plants are plentiful. So if you have space, plant a couple of oak trees anyway. So who else eats insects? All right, birds and their young, salamanders, spiders, moles, mice, praying mantis, cats, fish, toads, frogs, bats, snakes, turtles, Venus flytrap foxes, and the diet of bears consists of about almost 25% insects. So, native plants and biological diversity. I have searched for and rewritten myself explanations of biodiversity, and I keep coming back to this one that I found. Native plants are more than just pretty plants. They play an important role in our environment as part of biological diversity and ecosystem services. Biological diversity is the assemblage of populations of plants and animals in a place. And this will vary from place to place. So what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is a complex set of relationships among the living resources, habitats, and residents of an area. It includes plants, trees, animals, birds, fish, microorganisms, water, soil, and people. Everything that lives in an ecosystem is dependent on other species and elements that are also part of that ecosystem service community, and that is important to remember. They depend on each other to create the native habitat. If one part of an ecosystem is damaged or disappears, it has an impact on everything else. And I have read a little bit about that, but not a lot. It's kind of startling when you see the way the land is cleared for building. When an ecosystem is healthy, scientists say it is sustainable. And it means that all the elements live in balance and are capable of reproducing themselves. So what are some of our benefits? They are life support systems. They are our life support systems. They maintain the biodiversity. They purify the air, produce oxygen, recharge and purify groundwater, provide our food and shelter, sequester carbon, provide flood protection. And we've seen this especially in New Orleans, the New Orleans area. When the hurricane comes through, if they had left a lot of the native plants there, it would have helped. Protect the stream and river channels and coastal shores from erosion, generate and preserve soils and renew their fertility, moderate weather extremes and their impacts, and detoxify and decompose waste. I think there are more, but I ran out of room on my slide. So the advantages of native plants, they're once established, and you must remember the ones established, because you just can't put the plant in the ground as any plant and walk away and leave it just because it's native. When I first started reading about this, I read somebody's blog that says they get a bad name because people want to put them in the ground and expect them to do well. You need to take care of them probably for a couple of years, and then they're on their own. They have beautiful flowers over many months, providing nectar and pollen. But I'm going to go back to the ones established. They require low resources of water, fertilizer, if any. I never fertilized mine. Pesticides and low maintenance. I have a swamp milkweed, which I grow as a half-hardy annual. Sometimes they'll come back and sometimes they don't, because I plant things where I want them, not where they say they should be planted. So I just buy them every year and treat them as a half-hardy annual. And I have been getting aphids on them. And this year I'm just going to squirt them with soapy water, because I was going to spray them with an insecticidal soap in the evening, but then the bumblebees are sleeping underneath the flower. So I couldn't do anything. So this year it's the soapy water treatment in full force. They can tolerate wet springs and dry summers. They're usually hardy and long-lived, although sorry, I forgot your name again. Fred. We were talking that in a dry spell, his black-eyed Susans were not coming back, and that is a variety that is biennial. It will seed and be green one year and then flower the next year. Generally free of and resistant to most pests and diseases, and we're talking about the pests and diseases that they grew up with. We're not talking about the emerald ash borer that came in from China and came through the shipping through Detroit. So we're talking about the native pests and diseases. And there's just a huge variety of colors, shapes, sizes, textures, and foliage. And anyone who's grown native plants knows it's hard which ones to choose and which ones to just look at in the catalog. How to identify a native plant on the label? Each native plant, has two parts, the genus and the species names. The scientific name for this plant then would be Echinacea Purpurea, or purple coneflower. A cultivated variety, which is vegetatively reproduced or selected for a desirable characteristic that can be reproduced by propagation. It could be a hybrid, or it could be one that's found in the wild. And I have tried to track some of those down and have not had a lot of success. I need to get on somebody's blog that knows about all those things and where to find out. And so when we moved in, the closest plant to the Echinacea Purpurea was the Echinacea Purpurea magnus. And you can tell a cultivar because at the end of the scientific name, there will be another name in single quotes. This tells you it's a cultivar, and whether it is from a superior plant in the wild or whether it is developed in some other way, I don't know. You can probably tell by the color, but this will tell you that it is a cultivar. And if you plant a planting of Echinacea Purpurea magnus and you have some disease that comes through and kills one, it will probably kill them all because they're all the same genotype. Whereas if you plant just the regular native Echinacea Purpurea purple coneflower, the genetics in them vary sufficiently that the stronger ones will survive. So, for the catalog here, Neil Diebold, who owns Prairie Nursery, I had a question for him. The value of native plant cultivars for insects, and this is the big issue. If it looks almost like the native, is it okay? If it varies a lot from the native, what value does it have? And he says, and I was surprised at some of the points in his answer, the answer is unknown. There needs to be research as to the quality of the nectar, the compatibility of bloom time with various insect activity periods during the year, and that's important, and other factors. Some cultivars may actually be better than the original wild type and extend bloom times, more prolific nectar production, unknown, and other possible traits, while some cultivars may be completely useless. Can't say without appropriate research. And Doug Talmy and a lot of other people are beginning on this research. It's really long-term to see. But the thing that set me off was this is supposedly an Echinacea Purpurea. It's darker on my screen. But then when I saw Echinacea Purpurea Green Envy, purple coneflower green envy, I thought, And then things like this came out. And there's just a lot of goings on in the world of plants to try to develop different looks to the purple coneflower. I'm quite happy with this one myself. So on your sheets that I handed out, you will have a list of the plants that I will be showing you here. Virginia bluebells are just coming up. I've tried to plant trillium, but I don't have the right conditions. But if you do have a nice woodsy area, give it a try. I like the large flowered bellwort. It makes a very nice show. And wild stonecrop will bloom in August, and it'll grow in dry shade. It's a very nice plant. And the maidenhair fern there. And this is Solomon's plume. There's a Solomon seal, and the little flowers hang down from the stem. This is the plume, and the flower head is at the end of the stalk. And I love this, the dwarf larkspur. The deer usually eat mine, but every now and again I'm lucky to leave it alone, and I have about 5 of them. It's a short plant in the spring. Phlox varicata. Many of these plants die back. They don't die back altogether. You can see the remnants of them, but like many spring plants, they're ephemeral, and they're just blooming in the spring because the leaves aren't out on the trees and the sunlight gets to it. Jacob's ladder is a wonderful one, and the toadshade. There are several trilliums that you could choose from. I'm not very well versed on trillium. This seems to grow fairly easily. Wild geranium, Short's aster. This is an autumn plant, and would you believe, a goldenrod that will bloom in shade. Now, when I talk about shade, I'm not talking about your deep wood shade. I'm talking about your light shade, where it's shady most of the day and maybe filtered sunlight coming through. Joe Pyeweed is just a marvelous plant. There are 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on this in a meadow and a place we have in Brown County. And white turtlehead. And this is the host plant for the Baltimore checkers buttermilk. Now, I want to discuss the snap with you here. Two-leaf mitrewort. I have purchased my plants from Prairie Nursery. It's not offered this year, unfortunately, but I didn't know whether it grew in Indiana or not because I hadn't seen it offered by any of the places for purchasing many plants that I know about. So, if you go on the internet and type in, and I think it's at the bottom of your second page, on where to purchase plants. If you type, no, it's not there. Sorry. If you type in the name of the plant, the scientific name or the common name, and then just use USDA profile. This is the map you'll get up. And on this map, there is a little slide, and if you move this up, I would click on Indiana, and then move this up, and you will get this. And it will tell you what county it has been observed growing in. So,
what you were saying is at the top of the page.
oh, is it the top of the
Yeah.
page? Okay.
To see if the plant made it in Indiana.
Okay, that's under your, that's under your list of plants and slides. Okay, yeah. Okay, good. I tried to get as few pages as possible, so I can't quite remember where I put what. Anyway, this is a lovely little plant that's blooming right now. As I say, I got it from Prairie Nursery. If you're desperate for it, you can call them to see if they have any, but it's just not in their catalog this year.
These are still part shade.
Heart shape, yes. Native plants for sun and hard sun. And when I say begin to plant native plants in your garden, these are 2 that I recommend. The Foxglove beard tongue and their other foxgloves, well, their other, forget that, their other penstemons. And I can't remember the common name on them. Well, this is Penstemon digitalis, but there are others. There's another one, I think it's Penstemon hirsuta. And I can't remember the common name for them. Sometimes I can remember the common names and sometimes I can remember the.
Very beard town.
Yes, is that it? Okay, yes, they're beard tones. And the purple coneflower. My purple coneflower goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. It's a fantastic plant. The butterfly weed, and a lot of people are put off when they hear the word weed, which you should not be. It's wonderful. And this is the swamp milkweed. It's sometimes called marsh milkweed. This is why you need to know the scientific name, so you know you're all talking about the same thing, the Asclepias incarnata. This is the one I use as a half-hardy annual, and then I'm going to use the soapy water on this. I'm going to have my work cut out for me because I'm afraid the aphids do like it. The wild bergamot, as with a lot of the bee balms, it will get a little bit of the powdery mildew. I don't care, that's all right, it makes a fantastic show. And the sweet black-eyed Susan. This is the third plant I would suggest to plant in your garden if you're going to begin to switch to native plants. You can cut this back. It can get to be 4 to 5 feet high, but you can cut it back early. And I would just follow the rule you do for chrysanthemums, nothing after July the 4th. You can also cut the Joe Pye weed back because we have a meadow in Brown County and I know the deer eat it back. And it does come back a little later, but I figure that proves you can reduce its height. Okay, these fall sunflower will bloom for a long time for you. And the blazing star. And I have found in purchasing the blazing star that it's good to get a bigger plant with a bigger root system. Some that I've bought have been small and I have to spend too much time tending them. And I'm not very good. I've got too many gardens to tend one plant specifically. But this makes just a wonderful show. And one of my bucket list goals is to get up to the Kankakee Sands because they really have a whole huge meadow of the blazing star, the Liatris. Ohio goldenrod. My husband's English, and when we lived in England, in one garden I saw they were growing goldenrod, and I was horrified. Why would they have goldenrod? But I have found that the goldenrod to be wary of is the Canada goldenrod, which you'll find in old fields and along roadsides more than other places. And it has a rhizome it sends out, so it can create quite a colony for itself. But not this one, the Ohio goldenrod, and I have ordered this one and a couple of others that I'm going to plant more readily throughout my gardens. And the Rieflin Aster is almost a must-have. These two, for the monarch butterflies specifically, and others in the fall.
Do they get tall?
They get tall.
Okay, now, on that one there, I have 3 colors, pink, lavender, and kind of like a purple.
Okay.
And I would love to give people starts of them.
Yes, they do
Because
say,
they are so, they just multiply so fast.
They do.
And if anybody wants a start of them, they're just absolutely showy.
they do,
In
yeah,
the fall, they're
Yes, they are.
showy. And also with mine, I cut them down,
yes,
halfway.
yes,
Before they got that tall, and they bloomed anyway.
yes, yes.
And they're really fun, but I've got plenty to give anybody that would like them.
But the 3 shades can also mean they're native plants.
Yeah.
The shade varies a little bit. But they really are important for any insects loading up on their nectar and pollen for winter, either flying to Mexico or for hibernation. Now, these are 3 different goldenrods. I've grown the Riddle's goldenrod a lot, and I find in my flower bed it seeds more than I want. So I am going to switch to the rigid goldenrod, the showy goldenrod, and the Ohio goldenrod, and hope I don't have the same issue. It may not seed in your garden. I just dig them up and I take them to the Native Plant Society's plant sale, which is the Saturday before Mother's Day. And I can't remember the date. Yes?
How are they for people with allergies, cold.
Unless you,
Allergic to it.
no, you're not. Not unless you're,
I'm taking a test.
okay, then you, I was gonna say, then you are specifically allergic to it. No, it's your, ragweed. Pollen from goldenrod is heavy and has to be transported by an insect. Pollen from ragweed is windblown, and that's what most people are usually have the problem with. Unless, I was gonna say, unless you are specifically allergic to the goldenrod. I'm sorry about that.
Do,
This is such a gorgeous plant.
it is.
They get tall, and I have not tried to cut them back early to see if they are shorter. But, so, this is the Fawn Association. If you go under Illinois Wildflowers, they have the most amazing page on all of the native plants they have. And I have lifted that from, I can't remember which one of these, but it will tell you all the insects that are attracted to that goldenrod or any of the other native plants that are in Illinois, most of them in Indiana as well. I don't know who counts those, but I'm very impressed. But it shows you the value of these native plants.
That was Indiana, or Illinois.
Illinois wildflowers.
Wildflowers, not natives.
Just Illinois,
Wildflowers.
I think it's wildflowers,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I like this plant, it's little used, it's a prairie purple clover, it's a nice color, and the lavender hyssop. There's one more plant that's a bit bluer, but it's difficult to find a blue plant in the native plants. Have you found that, the blue?
I like the bluebells, but
Yes.
it's just very unique.
Yeah, yeah, these are later. Okay, this is a bluer, it's purplier here, but it's bluer, and it's the downy skullcap, the stubble area at the pennant. And this is the orange coneflower, this is another Rudbeckia, and it's the Rudbeckia fulgida, and Fred, this may be the one you want to get and plant, the fulgida. My club has spread. Now, native plants do seed. They'll seed more than a salvia. Salvias don't seed, they just get bigger. They will seed, because that's what they're supposed to do. And in the wild, they grow in their communities, and they don't overshadow. One plant doesn't seem to overshadow another. Whereas in your well-tended garden, you may have too much of one thing. I have no qualms about digging it up, putting it in my compost heap if I don't want it there. Or share it with a friend. Or as I say, right now, I'm digging things up and potting them up for the Indiana native plant sale. And I always want to add in wildflowers, but you now know why they've dropped the word wildflowers. Because not all wildflowers are native plants, especially to Indiana. Also, people were getting confused with the impause, thinking it had to do with animals. The INPAWS, impause. So it's just the Indiana Native Plant Society. But this is a wonderful plant. And they do seed, and I've got a lot for the sale this year. So just don't think that you're gonna plant native plants and you can just walk away. If you want a garden to look in a specific way, you'll need to take some care with that. This is a false aster. It can be cut back, it gets tall, and I think this is never gonna bloom, and it does, and it is a clear white in my garden. I think it's unusual in the autumn. And the western sunflower is nice because it sends a tall stalk up, and you can plant things around it. And the native grasses, I've talked about the prairie dropseed, little blue stem. And because this is on your list, you can kind of go back and look these up, and most of them will be in the catalog. Switchgrass, I really like this for specimen grass. The big blue stem is nice in its place. It's a bit heavier than I would want for a specimen plant, but I love switchgrass. And now we are beginning on invasives. This is the Chinese silvergrass of the Miscanthus sinensis. It's not on an invasive list, but I have seen it coming through Ohio on Route 50 up to Dayton. it is all over. And in southern Indiana, there are places where it's escaped its cultivation, and it's gonna get in the woods as well. So try to dissuade anyone, because this is what it's gonna look like. Native shrub spice bush, and you have the spice bush butterfly, turns wonderful colors. Now these berries are full of nutrition for the birds, for migration. So you wanna plant that, and this is the 9-bark, there. And you also have, on your list, you have the scientific name as well, and I think I spelled everything correctly. Winterberry, you have to have a male and female. You have to have one male plant, and we planted a row of 4, but I don't think we got the daddy for any of those, because I've never gotten any berries. I've always been so disappointed. And the button bush is in a moister place. Fred, you may wanna put this around your pond, maybe you'll get rid of some of your cattails.
Jane,
Yes.
did you say we're starting on the invasives?
No, I just did I did the other because we were doing grasses.
Okay, so just the one you mentioned
Just
there.
that one. And
Okay.
there's another one in this section as well, because I'm
Okay.
comparing it to something else.
Okay,
This is what you don't want. This is what you do want.
Yeah.
And there are others. Now, you do not need a burning bush when you have, the Foxglove gardeniae, with wonderful colors, wonderful flowers. I really like the shades in here better than I do the burning bush. The burning bush is so boring. And another one, the Virginia Sweet Spire. This is a cultivar, and do you know how you can tell that's a cultivar? This is your quiz.
only 2 words, correct?
Well, the Virginia Sweet Spire, Itea virginica, and this is the Little Henry, but what does it tell you that the Little Henry, how do you know that the Little Henry's a cultivar?
Because of the quotes?
Because of the single quotes in the name.
Yeah.
Now, the non-cultivar is a little darker color. Sometimes it's difficult to find the straight natives. And sometimes, if the cultivar fits your landscaping, and it looks very similar, don't say I said so, but I'd go ahead and plant it. But it has a wonderful shape. And I think the next one, you don't need that. And native trees, we talked about the oak tree, the birch tree, these were in the list by Doug Towns. The red buds are coming up, flowering dogwood, there's lots of several different kinds of dogwoods, tree and then shrub, more shrub-like dogwoods. And this may be my very favorite tree of all, the service berry. I had a site once where they grew them, and then they collect the berries to make muffins and pies. And I never, when you've gotten on a site, save that in some way on your computer, because I could never find it again to say where it was.
The birds always eat the berries before you can pick them anyway.
I know, they do, well, I think they grew the whole orchard full of them. And this is an oak. The Bradford Pear. This is what it does. Yeah, it's a weak tree, and they developed other cultivars to bring in to make the tree stronger. The Bradford Pear was sterile when it was first planted, but because it's a weak tree and everyone wanted it, the cultivars that were brought in now, it crosses with the Bradford. And so that's why it's all in the woods. Anything you see that's shaped about like this, that has white flowers on it this time of year, that's a Bradford Pear, yes.
There was just a story online that the Bradford Pear also puts out some kind of a toxin that keeps other plants around it from growing well.
Several of them do, yes. It's alleliopathic. Took me a while to get that around my tongue. Yeah, the garlic mustard does the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like a walnut tree that produces the young lawn, and only certain things will grow around it. But again, let's think about it. It's a native tree. and it has evolved with the things that grow around it. All right, I won't spend much time on this, but these are just some of the ways you can use native plants, from a special garden, erosion control, privacy hedge. They have year-round interest. Plant in different layers. Your flower beds, if you have an edge or something, flower beds, medium-sized trees and shrubs, and then your taller trees in back. This is the back of my garden, and there is the delphinium, the larkspur right back in there, and I have Foxglove avocado with native ferns, and I have hosta. Just a lot of things that will grow in the shade. This is another shade garden. I'm moving ahead for the running out of time for just the native plant. This is a formal garden with native plants. And this is the native columbine. I'm not sure why they put it in with the blues and the whites, but they put that in there. This is a rain garden. And rain gardens do need some care because they can get very overgrown very quickly because they like the place where they are. And I love this bed. In our front yard, we have, I think I have a picture of it, we have two big islands and then grass. So it's acceptable in the neighborhood. So this has a path and it's edged with stone. So it's tidy and it's neat. Just different shape. This is the front of our house and there are the beds, and all these are different native plants and bloom at different times. Now this is before, and this is, I think the name of it is Good Natured Garden, and that's after. It doesn't take much. And this is a Prairie nursery garden, and leave a little bit in the winter, because I didn't know it, the Luna moth cocoon is on the ground here. And it needs those leaves to hide under, and we need the leaves because some insects will winter over and provide food for the birds. Okay, so for summary, there is no maintenance-free garden. I'll have to repeat that a lot. Choose the right plant for the right place, which is what I told you I didn't do. Soil preparation is everything. Compost is a valuable resource. If you're making a new bed, do not order topsoil in, order a load of compost. Because the regular topsoil is just too heavy. Loosen the plant roots carefully. It comes in a pump. Water until well established. Trim back early for height control. Mulch with chopped leaves. Chopped leaves are gold. I always think in our neighborhood I'll go collect leaves from other people's, when they put them out on the road for the city to come get them. And then I can't because they have true green from spring and grass. So there's no way I'm going to collect those leaves. Leaves, check for invasive plants, leaf stalks for winter, and don't dig plants in the wild. So this is loss of habitat through destruction, through fragmentation, and we see that all around us, and through degradation, either by chemicals or litter or invasive plants. So it's a summary. Plants that were growing in a region before European settlement, they're well adapted to where they're growing. Those are the plants that are included. They're essential for insects and other wildlife, and they're vital for biological diversity and ecosystem services. They have many advantages. They contribute beauty to gardens and landscapes, and suffer increasing loss of habitat. And we need our gardeners' help to preserve biodiversity. And this is Mike Hamoy, who just retired from gotta get that out of there. He was the ecologist and biologist for the state of Indiana. Indigenous plants are a significant part of a region's geographic context. In fact, they help define it. They have proven themselves capable of surviving in a landscape for millennia. What better plants can there be, if not the natives, to confront the soil conditions, climate, pests, diseases, and local areas? Okay, now I've got some on invasives. If you all want to sit, you want to move around at all, or is everybody okay? Charging ahead. Why we should be concerned about invasive plants. And this is English ivy, and this is periwinkle. In Brown County near Lake Lemon, on one of the back gravel roads where we were driving along, the woodland looked just like this. And it took me a while to realize it was periwinkle or vinca. Had escaped probably from an old farmhouse, and it was acres and acres and acres of it. And there was no, you simply could not kill it off, it was too expensive. And if you turn one of your sheets over, you will have some of the plants I am going to talk about.
You could do that at my house. I do that.
Oh, okay, yeah, that'll do it. I don't know that it flies off into somebody else's property.
It goes out in the yard once in a while.
Okay.
So it's probably possible. I try to keep an eye on it.
I'm going to define invasive plants and their threat, how invasive plants got here, negative impacts of invasive plants, the native regions of invasive plants. That'll tell you where they came from when I show the slide. Organizations concerned with control, I should change the word control to management, and examples of invasive plants. Okay, what is an invasive plant? An invasive plant is a plant that is not native to a region and has negative effects on our economy, environment, or human health. Not all plants introduced from other places are invasive. And that is important to remember. The term invasive is reserved for the most aggressive plant species that have the ability to thrive, reproduce rapidly, and spread, causing major changes to the areas where they become established. And I wish, there are many sites that talk about invasive plant, but I wish I had this picture for every invasive plant that I have in my slide. I want it dead. And this is the purple loosestrife. It's being controlled in Yellowwood Lake in Brown County with a beetle. How they got here? They were deliberately introduced for agriculture or ornamental purposes. They were in the soil and nursery stock, the seeds. They were importation of seeds, fruits, and vegetables, used as packing material, came in the ballast water of ships, into boating and recreation. Now this is the Norway maple, which is considered invasive. And I have a list of invasive plants that is now, it is within the year, will be illegal to sell. And not, all of them on the list are in nurseries, but they're the plants that have been designated as the 44 most invasive in Indiana. To be careful, you can't give them to anybody, you can't plant them, you can't introduce them. I have a list of that I will pass out. Now this plant is not on the list, nor is the Bradford Pear on the list, because the nursery people were up in arms. The list never would have even gotten through anywhere if that had been proposed to be excluded from the trade in Indiana. But they have gotten the word, and there was a piece on PBS and WFYI in the morning talking about it, and people from the landscaping industry know that it's coming. I'm going to stop a minute and see if I got everything ready here. Okay. You can just pass these around while I'm talking. These are the plants that are illegal in Indiana, and the ones with the dot on it are the ones that I have researched, and they either sold online or in nurseries or garden centers.
They are or not?
They are. As of this time next year, they will not be. The Department of Natural Resources is going to be monitoring all this and going around talking to people and saying, these are the plants you can't have. But a lot of them are just growing and came in various ways. So, and I don't know how they're going to control or manage some of those.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but we hope the Natural Resources Commission, 2 or 3 members were positive about adding to this list of plants that were illegal in Indiana. And one was the Norway maple, and I hope they do the burning bush. And the other would be the Bradford or they're starting to call it the calorie pear, because Bradford is the Bradford name is a cultivar of the calorie pear. Impacts. They adapt to local conditions easily, reproduce rapidly with exploding populations, outcompete native species for light, nutrients, water, and space, few if any natural diseases or predators. Do you have any? Oh, there's some here, there's some. Just go back there, yeah. They altered the site hydrology, which surprised me when I was doing the research on this. The nutrient cycle, the patterns of natural disturbance, they interfere with the natural succession of native plants. They displace rare native plants, and they are the number one reason why some of our rare plants are disappearing, or the invasives. They reduce available food and habitat for wildlife and native pollinators, and we've talked about with the importance of the native plants, impact the forest owners, outdoor recreation people, parks and grounds, gardeners, hunters. I mean, we're just, some days you just wonder if you want to go to garden because you know you're going to have to remove the invasive plants. And control and management is very, very expensive. On the back of the list of this invasives I'm going to talk about, I have just put invasive plants have effective reproductive and dispersal mechanisms. I cut that slide out so you can read what they are. And it's PANTS, P-A-N-T-S, so just add the L in there. My typing error. See, I told you, we check these things over and over and over, and there's always one or two. All right, the Indiana Plant Advisory Council is one of the active committees on the Indiana Invasive Species Council. They created the Indiana Invasive Plant List, which you are seeing, which I handed that out. They are researching the next level down, which were medium invasive, and there's a whole scientific procedure to follow. You know, lots of sheets of paper to fill in where it was, how much there was of it. So the plants on this list don't come there just randomly. People observe and write down their observations before it's listed as highly invasive. And they developed top 10 invasive species management practices. There's a sheet over on that round table underneath the invasive plants from Brown County Native Woodlands Project, if you want to take one. They created the Report IN app for managing locations of invasive plants through EdMaps, and I'll show you a slide on that. And then they have created this, the pretty awful brochure, which you absolutely must have and show to all your neighbors. They work with the DNR to take highly invasive plants out of trade in Indiana, and that's what they're going to be doing more of now, since the rule has passed. They provide the scientific-based, relevant information about current emerging issues, implementing new communications plans to increase awareness, and I'm going to talk about that, to report invasive species, and updating their website, which they needed. So you can join the Invasive Plant Advisory Committee anytime. It's easy, donslack@tnc.org. Now this is the early detection rapid response, EdMaps, Report IN, easy to bring up on your computer. And this is what we'll give you, and you can click on any of these categories of invasive plants and see where they're located. And this will be Kudzu in Indiana. This is from the EdMaps Report IN. And these are the counties where there is Kudzu. You see how far north that is? I know Brown County has 3 or 4 areas that they're trying to control. But they planted it for erosion control, so if they remove it, what's going to be there if it rains heavily? Nothing for a while. So these are the plants on your list, and this is the Amur cork tree, which is not on your list, but I keep adding little things on my slides, and this is the butterfly bush. Sandhill. This is the Japanese knotweed, which can send roots out 30 feet from the original plant, and in England, you have to have a certification when you buy a house that there is none of this on your property. There are companies that were developed to remove and destroy this specifically. So there's a newspaper article about a family, I think I have the picture, and in England, and it comes into their house. It's in one of their dining room or living room.
Oh my goodness.
So this is a way that we can become more informed about our invasive plant. And this is the poster that's back on the back table there. The goal is to develop local cooperative invasive species management areas, or SISMAs, throughout the state to collectively combat the problem of invasive species in our landscape. Now, the blue are established, and the Brown County Native Woodlands Project is already in there. And this is the green are areas that are beginning to become involved in that. And this just indicates the people that are in charge of these different areas in helping to develop a system. And they're working in Boone County. So if you are interested, I have the name of the woman who is the executive for the Soil and Water Conservation District, and she will be in charge of developing that. So autumn olive, in Asia, came from Asia in the 1830s for roadsides, landscaping, gardens, wildlife, and erosion control. They all create heavy shade. They shade out the areas for native plants. The leaves, many of them, the leaves stay out late in the fall and they come out early in the spring. All the stuff that's green is bush honeysuckle. And it's just gonna crawl from the side of the road into your car. Don't stop too long or it will be there. Most of them thrive in poor soil or disturbed ground. But I've given you the.
Smell really good. Second one that smells.
No, it's the Japanese honeysuckle Levine. That will choke you to death. The other just lives in your car and the other chokes you to death. This is the border privet. Just do privet, all privet. Asia, Europe, North Africa, the 1880s for hedges and other landscaping purposes. They've all escaped a lot of them have escaped the landscaping. They form dense thickets. If it's a shrub, it's a dense thicket. It's the same story over and over. Bush honeysuckle. And it is on the list of invasive plants that are not welcome here.
That's the honeysuckle I was talking about that smells really good. That's
This one,
really, yeah.
well, the Japanese honeysuckle has a similar flower. Have you smelled the flowers on a bush honeysuckle? I don't think that's how they think. There's a white, it's the vine, the Japanese honeysuckle.
There was one out there by Marston's where you, up there near the place, in the bushes there, and it was wild, and it smelled so wonderful.
Was it a shrub or was it a vine?
It's a vine.
Well, that's, I'll bet you that. And this is the fruit that really is, it's like eating ice cream and cake for breakfast. And this is spring, and this is the bush honeysuckle. This is the maiden grass, this, Miscanthus sinensis, and we talked about that earlier, and this is what it does. Again, as an ornamental, more than 50 cultivars have been introduced, and they're introducing more.
Who's doing that?
The nurseries, yeah, the plant developers, big business, big business. I have a neighbor who just planted 2 of these. I don't know whether if I killed them now, she would know the difference. But look at the hillside. Yeah, it's still there, it's for. And this is Chinese wisteria. There is an American wisteria. Again, for ornamental purposes. And it displaces native vegetation, kills trees and shrubs by girdling them, which means it wraps itself around the tree and chokes it to death. Highly aggressive. All of them are highly aggressive. This may be more of an issue down in this way. This is an EDMAP's map. It's not showing up very well on the screen, but on my computer. The common reedgrass, this is Phragmites. If you drive up 65 to Chicago, it is everywhere. I have no idea how it's like the bush honeysuckle, how that's gonna be controlled early. Reduces and degrades wetland wildlife habitat. They reduce, and they degrade, and this alters the wetland hydrology because the roots are so thick. By accident, in ballast material in the late 1700s, early 1800s. Garlic mustard, it was brought over as a culinary herb to Long Island. I'm surprised that they're able to determine approximately the date that a lot of these came over. Spreads everywhere by human activity on your shoes and your boots. And I'm not sure those little brushes that I think the Nature Conservancy has some out, and Indiana preserves that you scrape your boots off before you go in. I don't know. I usually trip over those, but I don't know how that really can get all the little seeds off your boots and clothes. It gets on your dogs, your cats, it goes everywhere. Okay, and this was the chemical, you're talking about chemical toxins to larvae of native butterflies, result in the suppression of native plant seedling and growth. Several of them do that. There it is. That's in the house.
That's a terrible.
And the newspaper article, this was some years ago, said it would be less expensive for them to tear down a new house, which at that point was about $300,000, and clear the land of the Japanese knotweed and start again. You have to even know if there's any on the surrounding properties in England. It is so vicious. And it's throughout Indiana. This is the EDMAPs. If you want to know where some of these invasive plants are in Indiana, use the EDMAPs. Japanese stiltgrass, you do not have that yet here. We moved from New Jersey, and that was in New Jersey before it was in Indiana. And it was brought in 1919 as a packing material for China. Now, how it got from, this was brought into Tennessee, how it got from Tennessee to Indiana before it got to Indiana, Tennessee to New Jersey before it got to Indiana, I don't know. But all the logging roads in Brown County are just solid stiltgrass. And it has a little silver line up the more mature leaf. And this, we've got some other things coming along. This is the Japanese stiltgrass. This is the wavy leaf basket grass. And this is the small carpet grass. Sorry, I'm pausing because I'm looking at my typing at the bottom. This is the wavy leaf basket grass, and that needs to be changed because the punctuation isn't correct. And that's the small carpet grass. And I haven't seen these two grow. This is in Maryland and Virginia, and they think it escaped from a hanging vest.
Oh my.
So Japanese stiltgrass, the lower counties in Indiana, and this is in central western Indiana in niches. You familiar with niches? It's a area of preserves, and they think it was brought in by hikers. So they have a group every year that tries to get rid of the stands that are there. Mile a minute vine, that's coming your way. Accidentally they had contaminated holly seed. They even know the date. This is the annual kudzu, and it'll smother everything. Oriental or Asian bittersweet, and I have a little 8.5 by 11 that shows you the difference between the Oriental and the Asian Oriental and the native bittersweet.
Do you have it? Do you have that plant?
I do.
Oh, I bet that's neat.
This? No, this is what you don't want.
Yeah, I know, but do you have?
I don't have the American,
Oh.
and it's crossing. They're crossing, so I've tried to grow the American, but I just don't have the right place for it. But we have a woods area in Brown County, and I didn't bring it with me, but I have a trunk this big of the Asian bittersweet. And it's now moving on different places in our property. And what I've finally given up when we hire a group called Ecologic from Bloomington, that come in and do a survey of our property in Brown County and treat whatever they need to treat. I give them carte blanche. Just give me 2 days worth of work on that, and it's, yeah, that has an orange root to it, but they were selling this at the Nora Plaza Whole Foods about 3 years ago. And I took it and I marched in, and I put it on the service desk, and I said, you know, this is invasive. And they just kind of looked at me. They don't care. I know they don't care. Poison hemlock. If you've gone along the roadsides this summer, have you seen this plant? Tall white plant?
Yes.
Yep. There's a lot of it